Stanford researchers ran a study in 2019 that nobody talks about. They took two groups of people, same education, same background, roughly same level of conventional attractiveness, and they put them in identical rooms with identical strangers. And they measured down to the millisecond how long it took for those strangers to form a lasting impression. 400 milliseconds, less than half a second. But here is what the study actually found. The part that got buried in the academic language. The part you have to read 3 times to really let land. The single highest predictor of how those strangers rated each person was not appearance, was not articulation, was not even body language in the traditional sense. It was what the researchers called internal signal coherence. The degree to which a person's inner monologue, the running conversation they were having with themselves, matched the identity they were projecting outward. In plain language, people could feel whether you believed your own story. Carl Jung spent decades studying exactly this. He noticed it in his patients long before any laboratory could measure it. He noticed that certain people walked into a room and the room reorganized itself around them, not because they were louder or more beautiful or more dominant, but because something inside them had come into alignment, something underneath the performance, something that spoke before their mouth opened. He called it the feeling tone of the self. And in 7 words, he named the exact internal shift that produces it. Those 7 words have been sitting quietly in the archives of Jungian scholarship for over 70 years. Not because they were lost, because they were too simple, because the human mind, trained by decades of self-improvement culture, tends to walk right past the simple things in search of the complicated ones. You are here because some part of you already knows this. You have walked into rooms and felt it, that invisible gap between who you are on the outside and what you are carrying on the inside. You have watched other people command attention without trying, and you have wondered, quietly, what they have that you do not. You have been told it is confidence. You have tried confidence. You have performed it, rehearsed it, worn it like a coat that never quite fit, and yet the gap remained. This is not a character flaw. It is not evidence of weakness or damage or some fundamental wrongness in you. It is evidence that you have been solving the wrong problem. Because the gap is not closed by changing how you appear to others, it is closed by changing what you say to yourself when no one is watching. 7 words. That is all that stands between the version of you that braces for rooms and the version of you that walks into them ready. By the end of this, you will not only know what those words are, you will understand why they work at the level of the nervous system, why Jung arrived at them through decades of watching the human psyche, and how to make them less something you remember to say and more something you have become. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Carl Jung. Your greatest and most beautiful journey is the one that leads you back to yourself. Subscribe to Deep Psychology and hit the like button, and let us walk that path together. You have already begun sensing this. That is why you are still here. Something in you recognized the question ready or braced, not as an abstract concept, but as a description of your actual chest in an actual moment. That recognition is not accidental. Jung would say it is the first sign of what he called individuation, the slow, deliberate process of becoming the person you actually are, rather than the person the world agreed you should be. What this video will give you is not a technique, not a method, not a protocol to rehearse in the mirror before important meetings. What it will give you is language. Because the most disorienting thing about carrying a psychological pattern you do not understand is not the pattern itself. It is the silence around it. the absence of words that fit what you are experiencing. And when the right language arrives, when someone finally names the thing you have been living inside without being able to describe it, something releases. Not because the problem is solved, but because the unknown is slightly less unknown. Here is what Jung understood that most psychologists of his era missed. The way a person speaks to themselves is not just a habit of mind. It is a field. It radiates. It informs the micro-expressions you are not aware of making. The subtle shifts in your posture when someone looks at you. The almost imperceptible hesitation before you speak your own name. People feel that field before they consciously process it. This is not mysticism. It is neurology. Mirror neuron structures in the brain that activate when we observe another person's internal state pick up on incoherence. They register the gap between what someone projects and what they carry. And they flag it silently. In the first fraction of a second. This is why you can walk into a room with perfect posture and a rehearsed smile and still feel invisible. And this is why someone else can walk in wearing nothing remarkable and leave everyone in the room quietly certain they have just met someone important. The first word is disowned. Not the word in the sense of possession, not in the sense of dominance or control. In the deeper sense, the one Jung was pointing toward when he described psychological integration, owned in the sense of, I have looked at this and I have not looked away. When you whisper the 7 words to yourself, the first thing they do is ask you to own what is true. Not to fix it, not yet, not to improve it or reframe it or make it more presentable. Just to own it. Jung spent years watching people in his consulting room perform what he called the persona, the mask constructed through years of accommodating the expectations of others. Perfectly reasonable people, thoughtful people, people who, in every external measure, were doing well. And yet, something in them was hollowed out. Something behind the performance was starved. He noticed that the moment a patient stopped defending the persona, stopped insisting that they were fine, that the mask fit, that they were who they had agreed to be, the quality of their presence in the room shifted. Almost immediately, before any insight had arrived, before any resolution, simply in the act of stopping the performance, the room felt different. The person felt different. This is what owning something does. Not to your reputation, not to your social standing, to the signal you emit in the first 400 milliseconds. The second word is not what you expect. It is not strong. It is not worthy. It is not enough that tired. Exhausted affirmation that self-help culture has repeated until it means nothing. The second word is accurate. You have been told at various points in your life that you are too much or not enough. Too sensitive. Too intense. Too serious. Not easy enough. Not light enough. Not social enough. And most people, at some point, accept this verdict. They internalize it. They begin their inner monologue from that premise, that there is something fundamentally miscalibrated about their nature that other people keep detecting. Jung would say you have mistaken the diagnosis for the truth. What others called your excess was not pathology. It was precision. You were not too sensitive. You were accurately sensitive, picking up signals that less attuned people could not register. You were not too intense. You were experiencing the full weight of something that most people had learned to anesthetize. The internal signal coherence that researchers measured in those strangers, the quality that made certain people feel trustworthy. Grounded. Present begins the moment you stop treating your own nature as a problem to manage and start treating it as a precision instrument to understand. Leave the number 13 in the comments. In the symbolic architecture that Jung traced across myth, dream, and ancient numerology, 13 is the number of the threshold, the moment just before the transformation that changes everything. The number that frightened people assigned to bad luck because they sensed its power but could not contain it. If what you are hearing is naming something you have carried without language, leave 13 here. Let it be a quiet signal between you and the part of yourself that is ready for something to shift. The third word, and this is where most self-improvement frameworks fail to arrive, is not about projection. It is about reception. Jung spent the latter half of his career studying what he called the transcendent function, the capacity of the psyche to hold two contradictory truths at once, without collapsing into either of them. To know that you are flawed and not diminished by that knowing. To see your shadow clearly and not be destroyed by what you see. Most people who walk into rooms braced are braced because they have made a calculation, conscious or not, that if the right people see the right parts of them clearly, something terrible will happen. Judgment, rejection, the confirmation of the fear that has been running quietly in the background since childhood. The third word refuses that calculation. It does not say the fear is wrong. It does not promise that everyone will approve of you. It does not offer the guarantee that no one will ever leave or criticize or fail to see you accurately. It says you can be seen and survive the seeing. Not thrive. Survive first. That is enough to begin with. There is a particular kind of exhaustion that comes from spending years managing other people's perception of you. It is not the exhaustion of physical labor. It is the exhaustion of constant vigilance, the low-level, unrelenting work of monitoring how you are landing, adjusting in real time, calculating what to reveal and what to conceal. You know this exhaustion. You probably thought everyone felt it. Many people do not. The ones who do not are not more confident than you. They have simply, consciously or not, stopped performing the calculation. They have accepted, at some cellular level, the cost of being seen. And in accepting it, they freed the energy that was being consumed by the vigilance. And that energy is what other people feel in those first 400 milliseconds. It reads as confidence. It reads as presence. It reads as that quality you noticed in someone else and wanted to name. It is not those things. It is the specific relief of a person who has stopped hiding. The fourth word carries the whole structure. Without the fourth word, the first three become exercises in intellectual understanding. Interesting, perhaps, but inert. The fourth word is what moves the insight from the mind into the body, which is the only place it can actually change anything. That word is now. Not in the motivational sense, not as a command to act immediately or feel immediately or transform immediately. In the specific Jungian sense of what he called the eternal present, the recognition that the psyche does not live in the future you are trying to construct or the past you are trying to escape. It lives here, in this breath, in this room, in this exact quality of attention you are bringing to this moment. The inner monologue that broadcasts anxiety is almost always located in time. It rehearses futures that have not happened. It replays histories that cannot be changed. It builds elaborate simulations of what people might think, might say, might decide about you, none of which are real, all of which consume the same neurological resources as actual experience. The internal signal coherence that other people feel in you is, at its root, temporal. It is the coherence of a person who is actually here, not performing here, not trying to appear here, actually occupying the present moment with enough of their attention that their nervous system has stabilized. Their micro-expressions have softened. and the field they emit has stopped broadcasting the static of a mind that is somewhere else. You do not become present through effort. You become present through permission. The fifth word is the one most people resist, because it asks something that the entire architecture of social survival has trained you not to do. It asks you to want. Not to want appropriately. Not to want within the limits of what seems realistic or deserved or socially acceptable. To want what you actually want clearly, cleanly, without the layer of apology that most people wrap around their desires before they allow themselves to feel them. Jung called the unconscious drive to pursue one's authentic desires the teleological impulse. He was not romantic about it. He did not suggest it was always comfortable, or that it would always lead to outcomes the world would approve of. He simply observed, across thousands of hours with patience, that the people who were most alive, who radiated what others called magnetism or presence or authority, were the ones who had stopped negotiating their own desires down to a manageable size. This is not about ambition in the conventional sense. It is not about wealth or status or achievement. It is about the smaller, more intimate wants that most people have learned to dismiss before they even finish feeling them. The want to speak first in a room, rather than waiting for permission. The want to disagree with someone you respect, rather than nodding along. The want to take up space, physical, social, conversational space, without first calculating whether you have earned it. When you suppress these wants, they do not disappear. They fold back into the body. They become the tension in your shoulders before you enter a room. They become the hesitation before you speak your own opinion. They become the braced quality that other people's mirror neurons register before you have said a single word. The sixth word is where the transformation becomes structural rather than momentary. It is the word that separates the people who understand this video intellectually from the people who carry it forward into actual change. That word is consistent. Not consistent in the sense of disciplined repetition, not another self-improvement regimen to maintain. Consistent in the sense of congruent across contexts. Consistent in the sense of the person you are when you are alone at 2 a.m. is not a secret version of you that contradicts the person you present to the world. Jung described the persona not as something to be destroyed, but as something to be integrated. The mask is not the enemy. The mask becomes dangerous only when you forget that you are wearing it, when the persona becomes more real to you than the psyche beneath it. The people who carry genuine presence do not have no persona. They have a persona that is permeable, that allows the real thing to breathe through it. That does not require constant maintenance because it is not built on suppression. This is what makes them legible to other people. Not honest, necessarily. Not vulnerable in the way that word has been overused. Legible, readably, coherent. You feel it when you meet them, the sense that what you are seeing is connected to something real underneath. That the face they are showing you has a room behind it. That if you went further, there would be more, not a performance, but an actual person. All the way down. The seventh word is the one Jung arrived at last. It is not a triumphant word. It is not a word that will make you feel powerful when you first hear it. It may feel, initially, like a small word for such a large promise. The word is chosen. Chosen not in the religious sense, not in the sense of being selected by someone outside yourself for a special destiny. In the radical, psychological sense that Jung explored in the final decades of his work, the recognition that who you are is not something that happened to you. It is something you can, at any point, decide to inhabit fully. Most people experience their personality as a given, something they were handed, a constellation of traits and tendencies and reactions that arrived before they were conscious enough to negotiate the terms. And in one sense, this is accurate. Temperament is not chosen. Early experience is not chosen. The particular sensitivity or intensity you were born with was not a decision you made. But the relationship you have with those givens is chosen every day. In every room, in every moment when you decide whether to apologize for being exactly what you are, or to simply be it. The 7 words, assembled, do not form a sentence you will find in any textbook. They form a posture, an internal orientation, a way of standing inside yourself that changes. In 400 milliseconds. What other people feel when they encounter you. Owned, accurate, sane, now, wanting, consistent, chosen. Whisper them to yourself, not as an affirmation, but as a reckoning. As the quiet, unhurried act of a person who has decided to stop waiting for external permission to occupy their own life. Jung said, near the end of his life, that the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. He did not mean this as a warning. He meant it as an invitation. Because the terror, he knew, was temporary. What came after it was not happiness, not success, not the admiration of strangers in rooms. What came after it was the particular quiet of a person who has stopped fighting their own nature. You may be wondering whether becoming this person will cost you the life you have already built, whether the relationships that depend on a certain version of you, the roles that have organized themselves around the persona, will survive this shift. Some of them will not because you will become difficult or unkind or unrecognizable, but because certain connections exist specifically in the space between who you are and who you have been pretending to be. Remove the pretense, and the connection has nothing left to stand on. What will remain is what is real, and what is real will feel different than what you have been calling relationships. It will feel quieter, and heavier, and more substantial. It will feel like standing in a room where you do not have to perform anything, where the 400 milliseconds pass, and the person across from you settles. Not because you managed their impression, but because you gave them something true to receive. Think back to the room you imagined at the beginning of this. The room where you walked in, braced, where you felt the familiar tightening in your chest before your foot crossed the threshold, where you scanned for judgment before you had given anyone the chance to judge. That version of you was not broken. That version of you was working very hard, harder than anyone around you likely knew, to navigate a world it had decided was fundamentally unsafe to be seen in. But here is what Jung knew, and what the research has since confirmed.